Rembrandt van Rijn's The Night Watch, 1642, formerly titled The Company of Captain Frans Banning Kock and Lieutenant Willem van Ruitenbourg preparing to march out, remains one of the most iconic group portraits in Western art. Commissioned for the banqueting hall of Amsterdam's Civic Guard, the painting not only commemorates a specific militia company, but also transcends its civic function to articulate a broader meditation on leadership, hierarchy, and collective identity in the Dutch Golden Age. The work's monumental scale, combined with Rembrandt's daring manipulation of chiaroscuro, invests the scene with a theatricality that disrupts the static conventions of militia portraiture, presenting instead a vivid spectacle of motion, ambiguity, and psychological interplay. At the painting's center, Captain Banning Kock, clad in black with a striking red sash, extends his arm in command, while his lieutenant, Willem van Ruitenbourg, stands resplendent in pale yellow, adorned in ostentatious garments. The juxtaposition of their attire initially invites a misreading of authority, but Rembrandt complicates this perception by subordinating the lieutenant's flamboyance to the captain's authoritative gesture, even casting the captain's shadow across his subordinate. In doing so, Rembrandt critiques vanity and redirects attention toward the more understated virtues of leadership authority rooted not in ostentation, but in decisive action and the recognition of responsibility. Beyond the interplay of individuals, the Night Watch interrogates the very idea of civic community. Unlike the rigidly posed and hierarchically ordered militia portraits of Rembrandt's contemporaries, this composition stages the militia as a living organism, animated by movement, diversity of roles, and a multiplicity of gazes. Figures emerge from and recede into the darkness, suggesting both the inclusion and marginalization inherent in social structures. The later edition of the shield bearing 18 names underscores the transactional nature of representation, revealing how visibility within the canvas was negotiated according to financial contribution. Thus, the painting functions not only as art but also as a document of patronage, social status, and civic ambition. The subsequent history of the Night Watch's alteration in 1715, its relocations through Amsterdam's civic institutions, and its eventual enshrinement in the Rijksmuseum mirrors the shifting fortunes of Dutch political and cultural identity. The misnomer "the Night Watch," originating in the late 18th century, reflects how reception can reshape a work's meaning. A scene once understood as a celebration of civic pride was reimagined as a mysterious nocturnal vigil. This slippage between original intent and historical reinterpretation highlights the instability of cultural memory and the extent to which artworks accrue layers of significance over time. The Night Watch is more than a civic commission. It is a meditation on the dynamics of authority, the tensions between individuality and collective identity, and the performative nature of public representation. Infusing narrative vitality with psychological depth, Rembrandt not only redefined the group portrait, but also crystallize the paradoxes of a society negotiating between democratic ideals of civic participation and the persistent hierarchies of wealth and status. Its enduring resonance lies precisely in this complexity. The painting stages not merely a militia company preparing to march, but a society contemplating its own image. Concord of the State, 1642, Museum Boijmans van Beuningen, Rotterdam, is a relatively lesser-known but intellectually significant oil-on-panel work by Rembrandt van Rijn. Measuring 74.6 by 101 centimeters, the painting bears the signature and date Rembrandt F. 164, situating it contemporaneously with the Night Watch. This temporal proximity is crucial, for the painting not only shares stylistic affinities with Rembrandt's monumental civic guard portrait, but also reflects the broader ideological concerns of the Dutch Republic at a time of political and cultural consolidation. At its core, Concord of the State presents an allegorical vision of the Dutch Republic's unity. The very term Concord resonates with the 17th century Republican ideal that collective prosperity and stability could only be achieved through civic harmony and mutual obligation. Much like the Night Watch, the painting does not simply depict its subjects in literal terms, but embeds layers of symbolism designed to communicate political meaning to a discerning audience. The allegorical imagery functions as a visual counterpart to the discourses of governance, liberty, and civic responsibility that circulated in Amsterdam during the height of the Republic's golden age. The connection to the Night Watch is particularly illuminating. Whereas the larger canvas dramatizes civic militia as both a literal and symbolic embodiment of Amsterdam's vigilance, Concord of the State operates on a more abstract register, condensing the idea of Concord into emblematic forms. In both works, Rembrandt demonstrates his sensitivity to the political climate of 1642, a year marked not only by artistic achievement, but also by anxieties regarding the durability of the Republic's institutions. The presence of allegory in Concord of the State suggests that Rembrandt was fully aware of the expectation that art should serve not merely as ornament, but as a vehicle for civic ideology. Thematically, the painting can be read as an articulation of the Republic's idealized self-image. The juxtaposition of symbols, possibly including personifications of the provinces, instruments of governance, or emblems of justice, would have resonated with an audience attuned to the language of political allegory. The emphasis on unity amidst diversity also reflects the Republic's paradoxical identity. A federation of semi-autonomous provinces bound together in pursuit of common defense and prosperity. Within this visual framework, the painting becomes a meditation on the fragile balance of Republican concord, as much an exhortation as a celebration. Art historically, Concord of the State illuminates a dimension of Rembrandt's practice that extends beyond portraiture and narrative history into the realm of political allegory. It demonstrates his capacity to adapt painterly technique to ideological content, embedding his rich chiaroscuro and attention to symbolic detail within a framework designed to appeal to civic and intellectual elites. Moreover, its pairing with the Night Watch underscores the breadth of Rembrandt's ambitions in 1642 to align his art with the central political and cultural questions of his time, and to position himself not only as a painter of individuals, but also as an interpreter of the state itself. Thus, Concord of the State stands as a compact but resonant example of Rembrandt's engagement with the allegorical imagination of the Dutch Republic. It complements the grandeur of the Night Watch by distilling the same themes into a symbolic form, thereby reaffirming the centrality of civic unity and political concord to the artistic and ideological discourse of the Dutch Golden Age. David and Jonathan, 1642, Hermitage Museum, St. Petersburg, is an oil painting on oak panel by Rembrandt van Rijn, exemplifying his profound ability to merge biblical narrative with psychological depth. Executed in the same year as the Night Watch and Concord of the State, this work reflects both Rembrandt's mature painterly idiom and his enduring preoccupation with the complexities of human emotion. Its acquisition history is equally notable. Together with the Hellenistic Venus de Taurida, it formed the foundation of the Hermitage's collection when officially inaugurated in 1882. The subject derives from the first book of Samuel, 20:35-42, recounting the final meeting between David and Jonathan, son of King Saul. In this narrative, Jonathan warns his friend of Saul's murderous intentions and advises him to flee. Their parting at the stone easel becomes a scene of heightened pathos, which Rembrandt seizes upon with striking intensity. He depicts David collapsing in grief against Jonathan's chest, while Jonathan, though deeply sorrowful, restrains his own tears. The quiver of arrows at David's feet alludes to Jonathan's earlier gift of arms following David's victory over Goliath, and 1 Samuel 18:1-4, binding this farewell to their covenant of loyalty. In the distant left background, Jerusalem gleams as a reminder of both divine promise and the political tensions underlying the narrative. What distinguishes this work is Rembrandt's psychological insight. The biblical text emphasizes the extraordinary love between the two men, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. 1 Samuel 20:17. And Rembrandt visualizes this sentiment with rare tenderness. The composition pivots less on heroic action than on the intimacy of shared grief, inviting viewers into the private realm of human vulnerability. David's unrestrained tears contrast poignantly with Jonathan's controlled expression, suggesting the duality of emotional release and stoic endurance. In its structure, the painting recalls the devotional format of a pietà, transforming an Old Testament episode into an archetype of sacred sorrow and covenantal love. The painting also acquires a biographical resonance. Completed soon after the death of Saskia, Rembrandt's beloved wife, it is plausible that the artist projected his personal mourning onto the biblical story. Themes of loss, fidelity, and the fragility of human bonds permeate the canvas, underscoring how Rembrandt transformed scriptural narrative into a mirror of universal human experience. At the same time, the inclusion of Jerusalem and the symbolic arrows elevates the work beyond private grief, binding it to broader theological currents of covenant, sacrifice, and divine providence. Modern scholarship has expanded the interpretive field of David and Jonathan. Theologically, it represents Rembrandt's characteristic fusion of spiritual meditation and emotional realism, eschewing Baroque spectacle in favor of psychological immediacy. Culturally, some critics, especially within the framework of queer theory, have viewed the canvas as an image of male-male intimacy that surpasses conventional categories, even if such readings go beyond the painter's explicit intentions. This polyvalence underscores the enduring relevance of the work. It remains both a historical artifact of 17th century Dutch piety and a timeless reflection on love that transcends boundaries of gender, status, or circumstance. Within the Hermitage, David and Jonathan stands alongside other Rembrandt masterpieces, including Flora, 1634, The Sacrifice of Isaac, 1635, The Holy Family with Angels, 1645, and The Late Return of the Prodigal Son, 1668-1669. Viewed in this broader context, the painting forms part of a continuum through which Rembrandt persistently engaged with themes of love, sacrifice, and reconciliation. Its restrained scale belies its emotional power, positioning it as a vital link between the monumental civic works of the early 1640s and the profound spiritual meditations of his final decade. The Woman Taken in Adultery, 1644, National Gallery, London, is an oil painting on oak panel by Rembrandt. Acquired in 1824 as part of the National Gallery's Foundation collection, it demonstrates the artist's ability to transform a canonical biblical episode into a meditation on justice, mercy, and the fallibility of human judgment. Executed in the mid-1640s, the work belongs to a period when Rembrandt was refining his chiaroscuro idiom to heighten narrative immediacy and psychological depth. The subject derives from the Gospel of John, 8:3-7, where scribes and Pharisees bring before Christ a woman caught in adultery, demanding that he sanction her execution according to Mosaic law. Rather than succumbing to their trap, Jesus utters the disarming command, "He that is without sin among you, let him first cast a stone at her." Rembrandt crystallizes this drama through compositional hierarchy and symbolic illumination. Christ dominates the vertical axis of the scene, rendered taller than surrounding figures and bathed in radiance, while his accusers recede into darkness, their forms compressed and visually subordinated. This contrast between light and shadow becomes not merely optical, but moral, situating divine compassion against human hypocrisy. What distinguishes Rembrandt's interpretation is his resistance to spectacle. Unlike many contemporaneous depictions of the same theme, he withholds overt violence or dramatic gesture. Instead, the scene pivots on stillness, the silent moral force of Christ's words, the quiet humiliation of the accusers, and the trembling vulnerability of the woman. The painting therefore privileges the ethical over the sensational, embodying Rembrandt's sustained concern with the inward dimension of biblical narrative. At a theological level, the composition dramatizes the dialectic between law and grace. The figures of the Pharisees cloaked in shadow stand as representatives of a rigid and punitive religiosity, while Christ, radiating light, embodies the radical alternative of divine mercy. The disproportion of scale Christ enlarged, the others diminished, renders visible this inversion of human judgment by divine truth. Such symbolism is consistent with Rembrandt's broader corpus, where heightened contrasts of illumination often operate as metaphors for revelation. Biographically, the painting can be read against the backdrop of Rembrandt's personal struggles in the 1640s. Having lost his wife Saskia only 2 years prior, he was entering a decade marked by financial pressures and litigation. The somber tonalities and moral gravity of The Woman Taken in Adultery may reflect an artist increasingly attuned to the fragility of human circumstance and the necessity of compassion. In the National Gallery's collection, the work holds a foundational role, not only as one of its earliest acquisitions, but also as a paradigm of Rembrandt's theological humanism. Viewed alongside later works such as The Return of the Prodigal Son, it underscores the artist's lifelong endeavor to transform biblical text into a meditation on forgiveness, humility, and the light that penetrates human darkness. Its restrained scale belies the magnitude of its moral vision, situating it as a pivotal work in the negotiation between divine justice and human frailty. The Holy Family with Angels, 1645, Hermitage Museum, St. Petersburg, is an oil on canvas by Rembrandt van Rijn that exemplifies the artist's sustained engagement with the biblical narrative through the lens of domestic intimacy. While nominally a depiction of the Nativity, the work diverges from the grandiose iconographic traditions of earlier religious art. Instead, Rembrandt situates the sacred event within the quiet ordinariness of a Dutch household, thereby merging theological mystery with the tactile immediacy of lived experience. At the center of the composition lies the infant Christ, cradled beneath a canopy of firelight, while Mary leans protectively over him, lifting a cloth that both shields and reveals. Joseph, only partially visible in the background, continues his carpentry, his absorbed labor evoking themes of provision and humility. Hovering above, the angels rendered as small, winged boys with outstretched arms express astonishment at the incarnate mystery before them. Their luminous presence, suspended in awe, sets the spiritual register of the scene, yet they remain integrated into the domestic space, as if the divine was seamlessly interwoven with daily life. Stylistically, the painting demonstrates Rembrandt's mature chiaroscuro technique. The glow of the fire articulates a hierarchy of significance, illuminating the Christ child and Mary's tender gesture while relegating Joseph to semi-darkness. This distribution of light dramatizes the theological claim of incarnation divinity entering the ordinary while simultaneously reinforcing the maternal bond as the locus of revelation. The material textures from the woven cradle to the coarse fabric of Mary's dress are rendered with such precision that the sacred is made palpable, almost tangible. In presenting Mary in the attire of a Dutch peasant, Rembrandt deliberately collapses temporal and cultural distance, inviting his 17th century viewers to encounter the Holy Family as if present among them. The painting also resonates with broader cultural and theological discourses of the Dutch Golden Age. In Protestant contexts where overt Marian devotion was often suppressed, Rembrandt reintroduces Mary not as an exalted queen but as an ordinary mother, embodying virtues of care, humility, and vigilance. This domestic framing underscores a reformed emphasis on the sanctity of household life, while the angels affirm the continuing eruption of divine mystery into human affairs. Thus, the painting performs a subtle reconciliation between Calvinist restraint and the enduring human longing for sacred imagery. On a deeper interpretive level, the Holy Family with Angels can be read as a meditation on vulnerability and protection. Mary's gesture of shielding Christ from the firelight anticipates her lifelong role as guardian of the fragile divine. Joseph's labor, barely noticed in the shadows, becomes a quiet symbol of faithfulness in the face of obscurity. The angel's astonishment reflects humanity's perennial wonder before the paradox of God made flesh. Collectively, these elements situate the work not only as a biblical illustration but also as a philosophical reflection on the interplay of the ordinary and the transcendent. In the Hermitage's collection, the canvas stands in dialogue with other Rembrandt works that interrogate themes of family, suffering, and redemption, most notably David and Jonathan, 1642, and the late return of the Prodigal Son, the 1668–1669. Together, these paintings demonstrate how Rembrandt persistently infused scriptural narrative with psychological realism and domestic immediacy, making theological truths experientially accessible. The Holy Family with Angels, modest in scale yet profound in resonance, epitomizes Rembrandt's ability to transform familiar biblical scenes into enduring meditations on love, faith, and the sanctity of everyday life.